seats. Okay, so we're here. Okay, so don't hi, how are you?
Good morning, or it's afternoon
It's
already.
afternoon now.
Where did the day go?
I know, right? So hi everyone. We are here live from our clinical Facebook page. My name is Tzipporah Gerson-Miller. I'm a therapist, and we have
I'm Rabbi Judy Beiner. I'm the community chaplain. And you're probably wondering, what's the rabbi and the therapist gonna do or talk about? Well, we've been talking for a really long time. We always talk.
Yeah, Rabbi Beiner and I talk a lot. Like I think there's definitely a kindred connection there for sure. So don't mind me. I'm just reaching around here just to turn down the volume on my phone so that okay, there we go. All right. So this is our first time talking and broadcasting live to Facebook from Zoom. So it's just fun to play with this technology, and I'm super grateful that we have the technology. So I think we're all good. We're all good to go. So
okay, so we had hoped to, because whenever we talk, it's often about how we're managing this COVID pandemic, and what are the spiritual practices and resiliences that get us through all this, and we thought about how we'd want to share some of those because of what we're all facing. And we recently had a conversation about how, not only do we all miss being with one another in the same room, but all the more so there's this absence of touch. And that is just such a human need, and how hard that is. And we have no doubt that you all are experiencing the very same thing.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard this from lots of clients as well, is that they're just, they have this natural sort of instinctive nature, to hug people and to touch people, and just how much of a struggle that is, even if you are going to have like a socially distanced, gathering, how there's this mandate, this suggestion, invitation, whatever you want to think about, to stay the 6 feet distance apart, and how hard that is for people who just naturally are inclined, who are huggers, who are touchers, who get their energy right from other people, physical touch from other people.
Yeah. And I spend a lot of time on the phone with elders who are isolated, either in their beautiful independent living apartments or in their skilled nursing facility. But they don't, other than the nurse for a person in a nursing home, other than the caregiver who might come in and help them get dressed or take their temperature, there's no touch. They might be able to speak to their family by phone or FaceTime. In some cases, they can see their family behind a plastic screen, but there's no touch. There's no physical contact that's any humanness and any warmth. And even I was on and even more so, I've presided over the deathbed and have to go in with families where ordinarily I would be right in there with them and rubbing their back and hugging them and touching them. And I got to stand several feet away. And it feels very unnatural. And even if I'm not part of the family, there's that humanness of us that wants to touch each other. And so that's just an overwhelming challenge, both in times of happiness and sadness, that we don't have that available to us right now.
Yeah. And I mean, we're wired for touch. We're wired for connection that way. We come into the world. We know about like the bonding process between, an infant and their caregiver. It involves touch. It involves eye contact. It involves, kind of the stimulation of those hormones, like the oxytocin and the things that we get from being in the embrace of like a loved one, right? So even at birth, we come into the world like kind of wired for this soulful connection with one another. And I think like I see a lot of people struggling, you know, a lot of depression rates have really risen as a result of isolation. You know, there's so many things that adversely affect our health when we are isolated from other people. Inflammation in the body can increase. And so there's a lot. I don't know as if we're connecting like through the internet, and we have all of these wonderful technological platforms to talk to each other, FaceTime, Zoom, but it's really like, it's not the same, right? It's not the same. Because your senses, you know, when you're with another person, you can see them, you can smell them, you can, you know, I guess taste them, depending on what kind of relationship you have with them. But you know,
you when you're in somebody's physical presence. So this is a little bit, maybe a little tangential, but just this morning in the New York Times, Jerry Seinfeld, the comedian, wrote an article, wrote an op-ed to diss all the naysayers about how New York is finished, nobody's coming back. Right. And he, you know, and what he talked about was, well, of course, that's not true, because we're coming back. Because what is it about New York that's so great, you know, in addition to the theater and blah, 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 blah. So, but there's an energy. And he talked about his own experience of just feeling that energy of the city and the movement and the crowds and the people and the activity. And so, whereas, you know, we're talking about touch, but that's part of that energy that you exude and that somebody else feeds off of. You know, there was another piece last week too about, you know, also naysaying that people are never going to go back into their offices for the same reason that, you know, there's that energy when you get a bunch of people in the same room. They can be creative and productive in ways that just can't happen when we're all in these little Hollywood Square things on the screen. Right. So,
right. Yeah. Yeah. I think it reminds me of like times when I've lived in New York City, or even times like when I was living in Israel, like how there's just the proximity of people, like you all kind of cram on the subway, or you cram on the bus, and you're just like on top of people, and somebody's, you know, got their like arm, elbows smushed against your cheek, or, you know, there's just such a, that was such a part of just being in close proximity with people.
Right.
Yeah, it's
think about, and whenever you watch a group of children, you watch a group of young children and teenagers, for that matter, they can't keep their hands off of each other.
I know.
And that's a natural part of their development and part of their healthy growth. And we're not any different. We are not any different. So what are the kinds of things that when your clients talk to you about, when you engage in these conversations, you know, absent what we normally are able to do, what are some of the ways that you suggest to them to kind of combat those negative in their lives?
Right. So, you know, there's a lot of ways we can use the power of visualization, and we can use the power of our ability to remember sensual experiences. We can use those as a wonderful tool, right, for like accessing our resources in the moment, right? So it's always, I always talk about being resourced in the moment, right? So when you're feeling,
I'm going to write that down.
Yeah, feeling resourced in the moment. Yeah. So and most of us are accustomed, and we're conditioned, right, to look for feelings of pleasure outside of ourselves, right? So we're always kind of seeking, right, the latest iPhone. If I just get that, I'll feel good. If I get, that new job, I'll feel good. Like, we're always looking for things on the outside. And what we sometimes forget is how much resources we do have on the inside. One of those is the ability to remember, right? And to visualize. And so what we're doing when we're creating a visualization, right, is we're trying to cultivate those same feelings, right, from within. So the feelings of warmth and peace and calm, and because that's what we do when we're in the presence of another person. We're always looking for safety in other people. That's another part of our kind of our neurobiology, is we regulate, right, by seeing facial expressions on other people. So oftentimes, if you think about what happens, think about an example of, there's a child, they fall and they get hurt, right? Who's the first person they look to see if it's safe, right? They oftentimes are going to look to their caregiver. And if the caregiver is freaking out, then the kid is going to freak out. If the caregiver is calm and relaxed, then they're going to know that it's safe, right? So we're constantly looking to co-regulate. However, those can be sort of, those memories can be imprinted in us, right? And so sometimes all it takes is for us to close our eyes and visualize a person that we love, or a person that we feel especially close to, or we feel nurtured by, just invoking that memory of that person and getting real specific about what the person looks like, what they smell like, what they sound like, can invoke those same feelings, right? And can really do wonders for the nervous system to kind of relax it. So visualization is a very powerful, powerful tool. And sometimes I'll just walk clients through an exercise that I like to call calm, safe place. Some people call it peaceful place. And you're just asking the person to think of a time or a place or a person, right, where they feel really calm and peaceful, and to really invoke everything that you can possibly remember about that, and to sit with that and to notice what happens in the body, right? Because we're looking to cultivate that resource of inner calm and peace and relaxation. Yeah.
So as you're talking about that, I'm thinking about how, we don't have that sensation of touch available to us. As you're talking, I'm thinking about a conversation I had last week with an old friend, classmate who I haven't spoken to in a couple of years.
Yeah.
The phone, and the second I heard her voice, I was breathing differently. She was somebody she's a rabbinic colleague. We were roommates when we were in school. We've both seen one another through difficult phases in our lives and good phases, right? But the second I heard her voice, I'm very auditory.
Right.
With sounds, I'm very affected by sound. So that visualization is just like deeply powerful tool. I'm thinking too that the senses, how we experience through our other senses without touch, can also have that same calming effect.
Absolutely.
Of people, right? Lots of people will talk about how listening to music, certain kinds of things, or silence.
Yep.
are very, very calming. Going to a museum, where you have a visual feast. Wonderful. And then, of course, the obvious, as we've all been in quarantine, we've all been stuck at home, the baking and the eating.
Yeah.
We don't, but those are also just, they're not the same as being able to hug our loved one. But when one of my daughters was home and baking sourdough bread, because she has grandpa's starter. It was just like, it was amazing. So
wow.
Whole sensory experience that was also, though, connecting us to a loved one, and just so there's a multiplicity, I think, of ways. And Jewishly, I mentioned this too, the service of Havdalah, where
right.
candle, we smell spices, we drink wine, where we activate all of our senses. And so that, again, in the absence of touch, we have so much more in our physical selves and our mental selves available to us, at least to provide a barrier.
Yeah.
this time.
Yeah. And I think, I think a lot of the time we don't realize, right, until someone reminds us like how powerful the senses are and how, just how potent it is to smell something, right? Like with baking, for example, you're baking some brownies, you get a whiff of that, and suddenly you're back in your grandmother's kitchen, right? In the early 80s, and it's wintertime, and it's so powerful. And listening to a piece of music, I love how you mentioned music, because music is so powerful. And is, I mean, and what I hear from a lot of clients is like their number one go-to kind of coping skill is to listen to music, right? Like it's so powerful. And I think we forget that we have this available to us, and it's all inside of us, right? And we don't have to seek it on the outside. It's already there. It's just accessing it, right? Getting yourself to be still enough, to access it.
Right. And even organized enough, like because you talk about listening. And when I go out for a walk and I put on my headphones and I got my phone, I'm listening to a podcast or I'm listening to a book. And then one day I put on Spotify and I put on music, and all of a sudden I'm walking to my playlist and I'm going, oh,
Yep. Much better.
Much happier.
Right. So if you think, and remember too, you've got like the combination of those modalities, right? You've got the walking and the movement, right? And then you're adding that layer of music, right?
Yeah.
So you've got several senses engaged. And then you add in the endorphins, right, which is the brain's own internal morphine system, right? So essentially endorphins are like our natural morphine that our brains make. And suddenly you are in a much different place than when you first, were struggling to get up off the couch, right?
And I'm thinking about how lots of folks that I talk to now are facing the upcoming Jewish holidays.
Yes.
Some great trepidation because our synagogues aren't meeting in person. We're all on Zoom. And lots of people say, I just can't even deal with that.
Yeah.
The being on Zoom and missing the hearing the shofar in person, things like that. We can do it all online, but not in person. But again, many of the Jewish holidays are just a feast for the senses, right? On Rosh Hashanah,
totally.
We have apples and honey. We have plenty of things,
shofar,
right? Yeah, exactly. So the sound. So in the very same way, like our holidays, for as much as we can't celebrate in the way that we're used to fully. There's so many things that we still can do that invoke our senses, and in the same way, Tzipporah, that you talked about is internal to us and available to us. In the very same way, our spirituality, our ability to be reflective right now, which is very much a part of the season. These are all still available to us. So I think some of it too is that mindset of we're so stuck in the mindset of all the things we can't do. That we forget. Oh, but wait, what can we do?
Yeah. And not to say that like there isn't a part of me that feels like the fact that we can't gather, right, for Rosh Hashanah isn't a reason to feel loss or to feel like that's not to say that, because it is a huge loss. Like I can't imagine when I think of Rosh Hashanah, I think of like cramming into the synagogue. There's like, you're just shoulder to shoulder. You're like, I mean, there's
looking for a place to park,
looking for a place to sit, it's like, they're so shaking hands with people, hugging, kissing, that's what I think of. And yes, I think it is important to allow ourselves to feel that is a loss for us, but also I love what you said about let's focus on what we can do and like what is available to us. And what's available to us is already inside of us, right? If there's any takeaway message today, it's that it's already there. It's inside. It lives inside. And it takes getting quiet and intentional to access that.
If somebody were looking for resources as to, where could they find if they wanted a guided imagery, if they wanted to be able to access something like that, somebody watching this saying, well, I have no idea how to find it, right? How do I do that? All right. So I know there's an app on your phone you can download. It's called Insight Timer.
Can do that.
One of them. That's certainly one. I'm sure you have more.
Well, I mean, even just YouTube has it has thousands of videos that guide people through meditations or guide people through the experience of finding a calm, safe place inside. There's also, if people are interested in more of a Jewish perspective, there's I believe it's the Center for Contemplative Judaism.
Yep.
It's a website. They have a lot of guided meditations on there.
There's also the Institute for Jewish Spirituality.
That as well. And
go ahead.
No, they do something. I believe they do live meditations on Facebook too.
They do.
Yeah.
And for all things Jewish, by the way, I always like to mention www.myjewishlearning.com. You can start there and get anywhere. And of course, you could contact us.
Absolutely.
Chaplain at jfcsatl.org. And you can certainly reach out to us as well.
Yeah. And a lot of our clinicians are trained in meditation and mindfulness practices, are trained in trauma-focused work that does help guide people through really step-by-step, gentle ways of helping people to access and stay in their bodies, right? Because we can get really disembodied real fast in our culture, right? So getting embodied, being in your body, for me feels like a very radical form of wellness, because so much of our culture and society is trying to encourage us to be out of our bodies, right? And to be, to really look for things outside of ourselves and live in our heads, right? Essentially. But really our bodies are where our sense memories live. Our bodies are the portal for really accessing all of those lived experiences that leave imprints on us, right? You think about the body is it's like a living library, right? You have volumes and volumes of lived experience in there.
So there's a Hasidic practice. I wasn't sure if it was connected, but I think as you're talking about the embodiment, I think it is. The Hasidic rabbis were the rabbis of the 1800s, and as opposed to some of their other cohorts who were very head-centered, intellectual-centered, the Hasidic rabbis were very much embodied and spiritually focused. So they have a number of different spiritual practices, and there is one, and it is called hashkata. Some of you might know the word sheket, which means to be quiet. But so hashkata is a quieting practice. And so I a number of years ago, I wrote a little piece about it. And for me, I could come to that hashkata place. I'm a lap swimmer. So when you're in that flow, whether you're exercising or knitting or cooking or meditating, right? When you're in that flow and there's this, that there's this constancy and settledness and stillness in you. For me, I always describe it as whenever I get in the pool, whatever was bothering me, by the time I'm done, it's gone. And if I was cranky and whatever, but when I got in, it's done when I'm gone. So there's that feeling of hashkata, right? So exercise is obviously one way that people find this settling down. I think, but that way of knowing that from the inside, there is a calm, there is an ability to either let go or think more clearly. Right? But that hashkata, that quieting, I think is a really useful modality at this time.
Absolutely, because there's so much noise on the outside,
right?
And that's another thing that, I always talk to clients about, is really limiting, like being intentional about limiting some of like how much news you're consuming, how much noise you're consuming, because that affects our mental health as well. And to be real discerning as well, like where you're getting what you're consuming, right? Because your body is a temple, right? And as within, so without. So what we put in really affects us. And that does, it does involve like media and news, right? So that can really interfere with that inner stillness. And I believe, I mean, Judaism and you know, quite a few other spiritual paths talk about this, like our true nature, like our essential nature is to be still and to be calm and to be full of kindness and compassion, not just for others, but to ourselves as well. And we are not, you know, our true nature is not to be stressed out and anxious and worried and terrified. And, you know, that's not, those are all circumstances, right, of life.
Right. And they're very much environmentally caused.
Yes.
Right. No, and that's a really interesting, that's a really neat way to and you know, I'm just thinking about like somebody's probably saying, okay, great advice, but how do I, you know, approach something from a calm perspective? And you know, you know, there's that what we don't have control over what's happening on the outside of us, but we do have control over our response to it. So
absolutely.
Another practice of don't respond right away. Take a deep breath first, you know, and you have control over that. You have control over that. And that also helps you regulate the tension, the emotional tension in your body.
Right.
Big time.
Absolutely. And even, you know, when we talk about, because I know like initially, you know, we were talking about like what, you know, just the despair, right, that people are feeling as a result of not being able to touch, right, their loved ones, you know. But we do have, I mean, even just opening up like a photo album, right, or looking at pictures, or when you are in that moment of like dysregulation, but taking a pause, taking a deep breath, and bringing in that image or that memory of a person who you love, right? And even just bringing in that image helps to decrease, right, that fight or flight response, right? So if you notice, right, your breath might start to slow down, your heart rate starts to slow down, you might feel less tense, your shoulders, maybe they soften away from your ears. And so even that has the power to help us to regulate, you know, that nervous system response to stress, which gets so easily triggered these days.
And because you don't have, you know, you don't have the usual, you know, in the office, if you walk out of your office and you're having a bad day, you know, if particularly JF&CS, it's very likely the first person you encounter is going to hug you.
Exactly. It's going to hug you.
That, right?
We don't have,
you don't have that anymore.
Right. So,
you know,
no, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I worry about how, and people are writing about this, about how when this is all over, you know, are we going to be wary of touching other people? That there's going to be that post-traumatic experience of this wariness, which, you know, and I'm thinking, yeah, it will be, but for a time, but hopefully, you know, we'll go back to, you know, even if we're always wearing our mask, we'll still be able to washing our hands a lot, right? We can go back to that, but I know that that's a concern.
Because everybody you see is a potential carrier, right, of this virus. So it's and yes, that can feel quite threatening. I mean, I've noticed, like, even just being out of the grocery store, I think at the beginning of the pandemic, I could see fear in everybody's eyes, like in the grocery store. It just seemed like that the fear was so palpable between people, you know. But no, I definitely think about that, like what is going to be the aftermath of this. But again, remembering how resilient we are, you know, I think again, gives us some perspective that our ancestors lived through. I mean, we know as Jews, our ancestors have been through quite a lot, and they had to go through a lot for us to be here today, you know?
Right. No, and this isn't going to be forever.
Right.
We all have
There's
to
an
remind
impermanence
ourselves of
to
that.
it.
Your children
Reality.
your children will not always be in the next room at school.
Exactly. Right.
And someday we'll go back to our offices and our workplaces.
I know. So, well, I mean, I think I so enjoy talking with you. I always enjoy talking with you.
Back
and
at you.
I look forward to our next conversation. And I believe we are going to be hosting these live dialogues probably once a month, I think. Once or twice a month, right?
Look for them. And if there are topics, if anybody's watching, if there's topics that you want us to talk about, I think this series is titled Spiritual Conversations. So you get a sense if there are things you want to hear about, let us know. We're happy to do that. We can, of course, obviously come up with all kinds of things.
Right.
Not a problem.
Yes, we are not short of content to talk about here.
There you go. Very good.
And, you know, for those of you that are looking for resources or are going through a difficult time or know somebody who's going through a difficult time, JF&CS we are as open as we've ever been. It's hashtag JF&C never stops. We have clinicians, our entire fleet is working. So if you need help or resources or assistance, please do not hesitate to reach out
and refer. And our food pantry is open and going like gangbusters. If you or anybody and there are no qualifiers for the food pantry. If you are in need or if you know anyone, please 770-677-9300. Please call.
All right.
Well,
thanks everybody, and we will talk to you next time. All soon. Okay. All right. Bye.